Welcome to AP Breakdown. We're your hosts, Rahi Patel
and Sahasra Batula.
Today we're going to be talking about AP Gov and AP Comparative Gov with Mr. Werenka.
Thank you so much, Mr. Werenka, for being on our podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So the first question we have is, what is AP Gov?
Oh, how much time do you have? AP U.S. government, I'll say it that way. So the AP U.S. government class is really about 5 different units. We're learning about constitutional underpinnings, learning about the basics of democracy. We're learning about the branches of government, bureaucracy, interest groups. Then we learn about civil liberties and civil rights. Then we learn about political culture, political socialization, how American politics really work, political culture-wise. And then we also learn about campaigns, we learn about media, we learn about a lot of the linkage institutions that make our American political system work.
And the next question is, what is AP Comparative Government?
AP Comparative Government is different in the sense that it's really learning about 6 different countries and their forms of government. So we go from liberal democracies like the United Kingdom to emerging democracies in Mexico and Nigeria. We also learn about illiberal democracies in Russia. And then we learn about more authoritarian states, Iran and China, which obviously Iran's been in the news a lot lately, especially over the last couple of days. But it's really interesting because students learn all about the governmental structure, the constitutions of these different countries, and then they compare them in the way that they handle domestic issues, foreign issues. And then a lot of those countries end up having entanglements with each other or with the United States. So those students that learn about AP Comparative Government end up knowing a lot about different forms of government and how they operate and how they differ. And they really have a good sense of global citizenship from that class.
As a current sophomore, a lot of sophomores have the question if AP Gov and AP Comparative Gov is a year-long class or a semester-long. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, both AP US Gov and AP Comparative Gov are semester-long classes. Typically, at least at Troy High, when we offer comparative government, we tend to do it in the first semester. For the College Board statistics, it's usually considered kind of the easier of the two in terms of AP exams. So students generally have a pretty high success rate. So that's part of the reason we do that in the fall. We have so many sections of AP US Gov here at Troy High that we have to offer some of it in the first semester as well. Those students end up getting around 6 weeks of extra instruction, so we can do some different projects and things that we don't do in the second semester, excuse me. And then in the second semester, it's a mad dash to get everything in. I think we started this semester with 98 days, counting holidays, weekends, breaks, everything. And we're at I think day 64 today. I literally put a countdown on the agenda, so it's a great way to keep the class focused. But yeah, it's a semester long. It would, there's been discussion about maybe making U.S. government a full year, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. But we still are very, very successful in both classes, even in the semester format.
So what advice would you give to students who want to take AP Gov or AP Comparative Government?
It's a little bit different for each one. For AP US Government, one of the things that I always try to remind students of is to do the reading and to really focus on being a good writer. And so we do a lot of practice with writing for the free response questions for it. And so it's being able to take feedback, but it's also doing the reading. It's reading. We have 9 foundational documents that we have to read, plus the textbook, because in 98 days, I have a hard time covering everything. So if I assign reading, it means that this is really centrally important to the exam. So that's one of the first things that I tell those students. For comparative government, the biggest advice that I tell students is there should be one question that you ask more often than not, which is why. And so there's a tendency to learn about another country or their system of government and to just go, well, that's dumb. Why do they do that? And you really have to divorce yourself from that view of things, and you have to look at, well, why does a country do it that way, which then invites you to dig into a country's history and culture and politics and economics and demographics, and then you start to get a sense of why a country does things the way that they do. You don't have to agree with it, but it's a great way to really start to understand the whole of that country and that system and see what works and what doesn't work about it.
As I heard, like, this class is like very fast paced.
Yes.
What is the AP exam and and how can students prepare for it?
So the AP US government exam, I'll focus on that one because that's the one really kind of the front of my mind. It's 55 multiple choice questions, and students have 80 minutes to complete those. And so there are any number of different, stimulus-based questions. There's readings, there's cartoons, there's graphs that students have to read and interpret and then answer a few questions on. There's comparison tables where they could ask questions about Supreme Court cases or documents or things like that. And then students, there's usually anywhere between 6 to 10 of those questions, and then other just basic governmental knowledge questions. And so they have 55 minutes for those, 80 minutes for those 55 questions. And so I usually try to teach them, here's the kind of question they're asking, here's how to find out the subject of the question, here's how to eliminate some of the answers and get down to the point. So we do really, really well with our multiple choice exam questions. And then that's 50% of the student's grade. And then the free response portion, there's 4 different kinds of free response questions. They ask a concept application question, which is they give you 3 paragraphs of writing. You have to read that and interpret it and then use it to answer 3 prompts. Then there's quantitative analysis, which is, again, a map, a graph, a chart, some sort of data set. And then they have to answer 4 different prompts from that. And then there's a Supreme Court question. There's 14 mandatory Supreme Court cases that students have to know. The College Board's going to write 3 paragraphs about a non-required case, and then you have to match it to one of the required cases and explain how it's similar or different. And then there's an argument essay where they're going to give you this prompt, and you basically have to decide which side to argue on behalf of. You have to work in the 9 foundational documents. They're going to ask you about 3 of them, and 1 usually applies to one side, 1 applies to the other side, and then 1 document can be used kind of for both. And then you have to use 1 document, and then you can either use another document or you can use course content, current events, historical examples, something to prove the point. So you have to have 2 arguments to prove your claim, and then you have to have you have to acknowledge an opposing viewpoint and say, like, here's an opposing viewpoint, and I agree or I disagree, and here's why. But you always have to tie it back to your claim. And the score that you have from those 4 free response questions plus the score from your multiple choice gives us your overall score. We've been really, really successful here at Troy High the last couple of years. We were at about 83% of our students that took it. And we've had over 150 students the last couple of years each year take it. But 83% the last couple of years, and the national average is somewhere around 70 or 71%. So we have usually double the national average of 4s and 5s on the exam. So we really do a nice job on the AP exam in the 98 days that we have the mad dash, but they do a great job to prep for it.
So a lot of students are always concerned about their college applications and like their AP scores when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Like I know a 3 is very like controversial. Like it's a passing score, but like most colleges do not like give credit for it.
Yeah.
So can you walk through like the college application process with like AP scores and like which one students should submit or which one they shouldn't submit based on like the college they're going to or anything like that?
Yeah, obviously you want to submit the AP scores that are going to earn you college credit. And it's interesting because Michigan's one of the few states in the country where colleges and universities in Michigan will not accept 3s in some instances. And I have had conversations with multiple state legislators about that, about how other states mandate that their state universities have to take 3s and how it puts Michigan at a competitive disadvantage. So I'm on it. I'm trying to get that fixed. A friend of mine, his class in Illinois made it their post-AP exam project to get Illinois to adopt it where you have to take 3s. So again, there's a pathway for it. I'm trying to make that happen in Michigan. But for the AP US government class, I think, take the exam. I encourage every single one of my students to take the exam, because if you're planning on going to college, most of the universities in Michigan, or most schools, a lot of them will take threes. And so hopefully, again, we can get students prepared where they can get at least a 3, a 4, or 5. But we have a lot of students with 4s and 5s, so that'll earn them credit. So that's one that I think most schools take. So I really encourage them to take it. Comparative government, believe it or not, and this is where I might be controversial. I let my comparative government students know you should take the exam if it's going to help you. So in other words, if your college or university will accept it, which most will, look at what it counts as. So if it's going to count towards major, minor, or general education credits, something that will actually help you, then take it. If it's not, let's say you want to go into, engineering or something, and it's not going to count as major or minor, or it's not going to check one of the general education boxes, then in that case, it almost doesn't make sense to take. And I'm totally fine with them not taking it if that's the circumstance. But AP US government is going to count at least as general education for most schools. So that's the one I really strongly encourage students to take.
Also, like having a 4 or 5 in the exam, it's like there's not really a difference between it. Like 5 just means you got in like the A range of an exam. So like,
and the cut scores kind of change for each. Generally my rule of thumb is what I've been told, and I score these for the College Board. That for the U.S. exam, it means if you got a 5, it means that generally you scored 80% or higher in both parts. So it's it's a high threshold, but I think a 3, 4, 5 should count everywhere. So.
I know a lot of students get rage baited if they see like a 3 on their AP exam.
Yeah. And I'm always interested when I get the score reports. And I get 2 score reports. I get one that shows how all of my students did, and then they'll measure us versus schools in Michigan, and then they'll look at the global average. And I was showing my students, they asked about what we did last year, and so I pulled up our score report, and they were amazed at that we scored higher than the Michigan and global average in basically everything. So that was a really cool thing. But then I do get the individual score reports, and normally I kind of try to guess where students might be. And more often than not, students are kind of right where I thought, or score even a little bit higher, which is great. And there's very few times where it's been a handful of students that I would think the student's going to get a 4 or a 5 for sure. And then they get a 1 or a 2, which is, it's pretty rare, but it's always kind of a shock to the system when that happens. So, sometimes, students have a bad day occasionally and things happen, or they get flustered on an FRQ, and so that throws off their score. But, you're definitely more than your performance on a, 3-hour-long exam. So, so even if you don't quite get the score that you wanted, hopefully from an AP class, you're getting the skills and the content knowledge, which will help you later on.
Since we're talking about colleges and college applications, what majors in college would this class be good for?
AP US government is going to be helpful for a lot of different majors or minors. In the social studies, for sure, history, law, anything, students, if they're interested in a sort of a law school track, it's going to really be helpful. International relations, a lot of times business, because there's a political component, political science component, but it's going to count, like I said, for general education for a lot of different schools. So it's a really helpful one. Comparative government's a little different. Again, it's mostly, international relations, maybe an international business major, or again, something with political science. Those are generally speaking where these 2 classes are going to come in really handy for majors and minors.
How can students prepare for this class before they take it?
Biggest thing that I usually ask my students when they walk in for U.S. government is, how many of you have read the Constitution? And it's normally a handful. So I think I have almost 150 students this semester. So when I started with that question, I think I maybe had about 5. So it's really one of those things that if you have, and we have to build that constitutional knowledge, because if you get the Constitution and you get the first unit, the second unit becomes way easier. So that's one of the first things. I would say some of the other foundational documents too, but some of them are really challenging. So, some of the documents, if you read the Declaration of Independence, if you read the Constitution, that helps. Some of the Federalist papers are really challenging, so that's almost one of the things I would want them to kind of wait for. But that usually helps. For comparative government, being aware of global news, which is challenging in the media environment we have, because so many news outlets are cutting their foreign news or their non-domestic news sources. So it's a little bit more of a challenge. But the more of a background they have of the different countries that we study, the better they're going to do. So if you know you're going into either of those two classes, those are kind of the big things. Have sort of a baseline of knowledge of the AP comparative countries and read the Constitution here. I think that really helps.
Thank you so much, Mr. Werenka, for being on our podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
We hope you got more insight about AP Gov and plan on taking it.
Thank you so much for watching this podcast, and don't forget to follow our Instagram at AP Breakdown TSD.
Have a great day.
Bye.